It's time for a reality check. It's time for America to wake up to the truth.
You want answers?
I think I'm entitled.
You want answers?
I want the truth!
You can't handle the truth.
Do you want to know what it is? It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more.
The American people have been lied to. People assume that when they say the United States was founded on God, that it was founded on the God of the Bible, Jesus Christ. But that couldn't be any further from the truth. The United States was founded on the God of this world, Lucifer, the God of the Freemasons.
Freemasonry prays to a God they call the Grand Architect of the universe, under which you can find, according to Masonry, all the gods. So even though St. Paul says that Jesus' name is the name above all names, Freemasonry says that God is the nameless one of 100 names. Masonry not only evokes deity in prayer, but it also has unique symbols and names for God. I mentioned the Grand Architect of the universe. In English-speaking lodges, the God of Masonry is represented by the letter G. And in the Masonic Bible, which they give their initiates, which is a King James translation of the Bible with its own Masonic appendix, it says that the letter G represents, quote, the great God of all Freemasons. Masonry also is, the God of Masonry is all represented by the all-seeing eye, which is clearly a pagan symbol going back to Osiris. And every Mason is required to bow in an act of idolatry to these symbols in Masonic ritual. So Freemasonry, through the use of these unique names, unique symbols, and unique prayers, seeks to unite men into a spiritual brotherhood, and also the deities of all these religions into a spiritual Godhead. This is a monstrous form of syncretism. Because the God of Masonry is not the Holy Trinity, it is a false god, and it's an abomination before the true God. As St. Paul says, there are many gods and many lords, but only one true God and one Lord, Jesus Christ. David tells us in the Psalms that all the gods of the nations are devils, and hence the God of Freemasonry is the devil.
And hence the God of Freemasonry is the devil.
The ideology of Freemasonry is enshrined in the U.S. Constitution. For example, the Establishment Clause, where the government won't respect any religion. That's a denial of the social kingship of our Lord Jesus Christ. The Free Exercise Clause, which gives man a right to practice any religion. And it was, in fact, United States Supreme Court justices who created the doctrine of separation of church and state in the United States. Under Presidents Roosevelt, Truman, and Eisenhower, all of whom were Freemasons, they appointed, and collectively, 12 Supreme Court justices, all of whom were Masons, and from 1941 to 1971, Masons dominated the Supreme Court, and through those judicial decisions created the Masonic doctrine of separation of church and state.
And if you don't believe him, perhaps you'll believe Albert Pike, a prominent member of the Freemasons. Pike served as the Sovereign Grand Commander of the Supreme Council, Scottish Rite, Southern Jurisdiction, USA, from 1859 to 1889. He published Morals and Dogma of the Ancient and Accepted Scottish Rite of Freemasonry in 1871, which is given to new Masonic initiates. He was also a Confederate Brigadier General in the Civil War and instrumental in founding, and later a Chief Judicial Officer in the Ku Klux Klan. So this man is pretty adept in what's going on in Freemasonry. So let's listen to what he said about the God of Freemasonry, Lucifer.
That which we must say to the crowd is we worship a God, but it is the God one adores without superstition. To you, Sovereign Grand Inspector General, we say this, and you may repeat it to the brethren of the 32nd, 31st and 30th degrees. The Masonic religion should be, by all of us initiates of the high degrees, maintained in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine. If Lucifer were not God, would Adonai, whose deeds prove cruelty, perfidy and hatred of man, barbarism and repulsion for science, would Adonai and his priests calumniate him? Yes, Lucifer is God, and unfortunately Adonai is also God, for the eternal law is that there is no light without shade, no beauty without ugliness, no white without black. For the absolute can only exist as two gods. Darkness being necessary for light to serve as its foil, as the pedestal is necessary to the statue, and the brake to the locomotive. Thus, the doctrine of Satanism is heresy, and the true and pure philosophical religion is the belief in Lucifer, the equal of Adonai, but Lucifer, God of light and God of good, is struggling for humanity against Adonai, the God of darkness and evil.
What is your problem?
Just that, sir.
Okay.
I'm a Christian, sir.
I'm pure and virtuous and wholesome and innocent. How can you say anything bad about me?
Sir, you need to be born again.
I am born again.
Now, did you just say that you were Lucifer?
I am Lucifer.
Okay, define Lucifer for me.
Pure, virtuous, wholesome, innocent individual that's out to help people.
Lucifer is?
Yeah.
Say that again. Lucifer is a pure, holy,
Virtuous.
virtuous. Now, is he the Lucifer that God created?
That's the same one.
As you can see, our first president, George Washington, was a Freemason. They didn't even try to hide it. Everything's hidden in plain sight, right in front of your face, but nobody ever sees the truth, because the God of this world has blinded the minds of them that believe not. Sadly, countless men and women have lost their lives under the auspices of this country being founded on freedom, on Jesus Christ. Yet truly, it was founded on slavery, bondage, and the God of this world, Lucifer. All the government had to do was take the magic bullet and fill it with deception, dishonesty, evil, corruption, witchcraft, Freemasonry, money, religion, and the occult. Mix in a little snake oil for good measure and blend it all up.
Now let's check the consistency. So, let's unscrew it here. Now as you can see,
We come up with a big clump of deception that we're fed on a daily basis, easily put into the minds of unsuspecting Americans.
The mysterious temple. Its entrance guarded by massive stone columns and sphinxes. Inside, strange symbols, ancient inscriptions, and mystical numbers lead to a room shaped like a pyramid, with an eye that points toward the heavens. And in the center of the floor, a massive altar. Some of the most powerful men in the country gather here to enact an ancient secret ritual, drinking blood from a human skull. And all of it happening just a mile from the U.S. Capitol. The ritual is real, part of the history of the secretive brotherhood called the Freemasons. The secretive group, the Freemasons, a worldwide brotherhood that's centuries old and still active. George Washington was a Mason, along with 13 other presidents and numerous Supreme Court justices. Benjamin Franklin published a book about Freemasonry on his own printing press. 9 signers of the Declaration of Independence were Freemasons, including the man with the biggest signature, John Hancock. Freemasons secretly control the U.S. government. Take a dollar bill, turn it over, look at the Great Seal of the United States on the back. Now, draw a Star of David. One point will match up with the all-seeing eye, a common Masonic symbol. Now, look at the letters at the other points of the star. M, A, S, O, N. Coincidence? Some of its highest-ranking officials are Freemasons. This is the headquarters of the Scottish Rite Freemasons in Washington, D.C. They call it the House of the Temple.
The father of our country was a Freemason. There's no question of this.
And historians agree that principles of Freemasonry became cherished principles of the United States. Hidden away on the lower level of the Masonic House of the Temple in Washington, D.C., there's a remarkable painting not many people have seen. George Washington, the first president of the United States, wears the decorated apron of Freemasonry. Nearby are the square and the compass, traditional symbols of Freemasonry. The painting,
it's a cornerstone laying ritual, and essentially a date is chosen that is auspicious from an astrological standpoint. And there will be certain blessings that are given when this cornerstone is laid.
and what building is George Washington, Freemason, laying the cornerstone for? The United States Capitol.
On September 18, 1793, President George Washington and area Freemasons laid the cornerstone of the U.S. Capitol building during a ceremony that included corn, oil, and wine. On September 18, 2018, congressional members, the architect of the Capitol, and Masonic leaders marked the 225th anniversary in the Capitol's Statuary Hall with a reenactment of the ceremony.
It has been the custom since time immemorial to dedicate the cornerstone with corn, wine, and oil. We present them now in the name of the great architect of the universe to invoke his continued blessing, which he has bestowed upon our country and its people.
Most worshipful, we pour this corn as an emblem of nourishment. May it serve as a symbol of nourishment for all of humanity.
Most worshipful, we pour this wine as an emblem of refreshment. May the giver of every blessing prosper all our laudable undertakings.
Most worshipful, we pour this oil as an emblem of joy. May peace, love, happiness transcend this our great land.
So mote did it be.
Mote it be. The ceremony of laying a cornerstone has been passed down to us from time immemorial. It is symbolic of that spiritual building which each one of us is engaged in erecting during the course of our natural lives. May the great ruler of the universe continue to bless and consecrate this structure which has risen from the foundation stone, and may he continue to bless us as we erect our spiritual building, the chief foundation stone of which may always be well-formed, true, and trusty.
And it's not just the Capitol. Those ceremonies, those rituals were used in the building of the Washington Monument and the White House.
They were, as well as many, many other buildings.
A city of famous monuments and residents, secret architecture, mysterious symbols, and world-famous avenues designed not for traffic, but for astrology.
Pennsylvania Avenue is the equivalent of an ancient Egyptian temple which has been opened up to the sky.
Ovason laid out his case in his book, The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital. He took us for a tour a few months ago to show just how our nation's capital is related to the zodiac. Why? Well, he says many of the city's planners were members of the fraternal organization, the Freemasons, and they wanted to orient the layout of Washington to the stars.
Most of them were not astrologers in the accepted sense of the word, but they were certainly astronomers, and they were certainly deeply interested in the myth of the stars.
And one astrological sign in particular, Virgo, the Virgin. The idea that this city would be the center of a new empire, but it would have its temples to the stars, just as the Romans and the Greeks built. Take the triangle formed by the White House, the Washington Monument, and the Capitol. It was laid out that so each part of that triangle corresponds to a major star surrounding the constellation of Virgo.
A sheaf of wheat is often used to depict the goddess of nature, shown here as Virgo. An exposed breast and the liberty cap are well-known attributes of Isis, used extensively during the French Revolution. Here the symbols are shown together in Delacroix's Liberty Guiding the People. The goddesses personified on both sides of the Atlantic as nature, reason, liberty, freedom, and Columbia are all esoteric references to the Egyptian goddess Isis. Here's a silver dollar showing liberty with a liberty cap on a pole. The seal of the U.S. Senate shows the now familiar red cap as well. To top it off, the goddess Freedom on the outside of the Capitol Dome, and recently in the middle of the Capitol Visitor Center, are yet more depictions of you-know-who. The architects of the Capitol are clearly obsessed with the secret worship of Isis. Following the goddess Liberty upward, we see how the entire District of Columbia was originally surveyed by George Washington in 1791. The mile markers are placed ad quadratum, just like the elevation of the House of the Temple built more than a century later. This later organic interruption in the lower portion of the square became Alexandria, Virginia. In the ancient world, Isis had an important temple on the island of Pharos, just outside Alexandria, Egypt. Pharos was the location of the lighthouse of Alexandria, wonder of the ancient world. The light that shone from it was the Stella Maris, star of the sea, one of the many epithets for Isis. The highest point in Alexandria, Virginia, has a replica of the ancient lighthouse, in the form of the George Washington Masonic National Memorial. How is it that we keep finding secret connections to Isis and ancient Egypt in a country that has no ostensible reason to make this symbolic linkage? Believe it or not, Pennsylvania Avenue is astronomically oriented to the heliacal rising of Sirius. The ancient Egyptians based their calendar on this phenomenon, which is the day when Isis's star, Sirius, is visible on the horizon just before sunrise. From the White House in early August, Sirius is visible a few minutes before sunrise, directly behind the Capitol building. From the perspective of the Capitol building, sunset on this same day passes straight down Pennsylvania Avenue and sets over the apex of the pyramid atop the National Post Office. If you overlay a pair of pentagrams over the Capitol building, a couple of interesting things occur. These edges follow Pennsylvania and Maryland avenues, and RFK Stadium from 1961 is framed perfectly in the crook of the opposing pentagram. I noticed 4 radiating streets above and below the Capitol building. Then it clicked with the pentagrams, and I see what is actually depicted here is the Templar cross. Can there now be any doubt who is behind the program of symbolism in D.C.? The Templars may be long gone, but the Scottish Freemasons remain active today. David Oveson's groundbreaking book, The Secret Architecture of Our Nation's Capital, reveals that D.C. has more zodiacs than any city in the world, concentrated in what is called the Federal Triangle. The Federal Triangle contains many important governmental structures, including the National Archives, the National Post Office, the Departments of Justice and Commerce, and so on. Most importantly, Oveson shows how these Federal Triangle zodiacs draw attention to one constellation in particular, Virgo. Virgo the Virgin is an esoteric representation of Isis. Oveson's research into Masonic symbolism led him to map the stars Arcturus, Regulus, and Spica to a terrestrial triangle connecting the White House, Capitol building, and the point where many think the Washington Monument was supposed to be. You see, the Washington Monument is shifted slightly to the east with respect to the White House Jefferson Memorial north-south axis. Some claim this shift was due to the fact that the marked point is on landfill, and the site where the monument was actually built is on solid ground. In any case, here is that particular stellar arrangement brought down to earth. We see Virgo over the Federal Triangle and Leo over the Capitol building. 18th century Masonic French astronomer Jérôme Lalande wrote, "The Virgin is consecrated to Isis, just as Leo is consecrated to her husband Osiris." So Isis is linked with the Federal Triangle and Osiris with the Capitol building. The Virgin's right hand points to the White House, but her left hand is actually on the Washington Monument. This is very interesting to those who know the Isis story. Could Isis be holding Osiris's golden phallus in the form of the Washington Monument? As the ancient Egyptian story goes, It all started when Set became jealous of his brother Osiris, who was king of all Egypt, and whose girlfriend was the beautiful Isis. Set then deceived and killed Osiris, cut his body into 14 parts, sealed all but one of them in a coffin, and sent it down the Nile. As a final insult, he tossed Osiris's penis into the river. His sister consort Isis was at length able to recover and magically reconnect all of Osiris's parts, except for his penis, which was unfortunately eaten by a fish. Isis fashioned a golden phallus, attached it to Osiris, and brought him back to life with a song. From this experience, the resurrected Osiris became Lord of the Dead. Isis was impregnated with the golden phallus, and their son Horus grew to become god of the sun. It's the original story of sex and violence, jealousy, incest, and pregnancy. The Washington Monument is an obvious phallic symbol. The Vesica Pisces paths surrounding the obelisk suggest female genitals. Taken together, the symbols represent the joining of Osiris and Isis and the conception of the sun god Horus. Take a look at what is above the elevator that goes up the shaft of the Washington Monument. Right above the elevator doors there is a bronze sculpture of George Washington, sculpted by French Freemason Houdon, and above that is the winged disc of Horus. What in the world does this Egyptian solar symbol have to do with America? It's a clue to the secret meaning of the obelisk, in the most public of places, but how many actually see it and understand? The dimensions of the monument are all 6s and 5s. What an amazing coincidence that 6,660 inches equals 555 feet. The Washington Monument is not a true obelisk cut from a single piece of stone. Instead, it is both literally and figuratively a monumental work of masonry. Bernard I. Peache's meticulous metrological study of the Washington Monument reveals a sacred diagram projected on the earth. Based on the exact height and angle of the pyramidion, its face and ridge lines project down to the ground and trace circles that are proportioned ad quadratum with respect to each other. The diagram shown here is called the octagram star in mathematics. It's a symbol used in many religions and cultures around the world. The earliest example I've found that has this symmetry is the Star of Inanna, the Sumerian goddess whom all the Isis obsession is ultimately based on. Archaeologists identify the Sumerian culture as the oldest civilization on Earth. Sumeria predated ancient Egypt, but it wasn't even discovered until 1890, so that must be why most esoteric references are to Isis rather than Inanna. The octagram star is resoundingly a solar symbol, appropriately fitting the male obelisk, which is the primary reading of the Washington Monument. However, female energy is not entirely neglected in the Washington Monument. We've already seen how a stretched Vesica Pisces symbol surrounds the obelisk. Rick Campbell has brought something even more hidden to light. If you draw Vesica Pisces to scale, with the circle's diameters equal to the height of the Washington Monument's 555 feet, the Great Pyramid of Egypt fits perfectly inside the vulva. This is no accident. The architect who designed the Washington Monument must have wanted to secretly link it with the Great Pyramid.
Pennsylvania Avenue was laid out so that in mid-August the sun will shine directly down the entire length of the street, giving the U.S. Capitol a clear view of the setting sun. And here's more proof. The top of the old post office building on Pennsylvania Avenue is also designed so that mid-August sun will cut right through it, imitating exactly the radiant triangle around this all-seeing eye on the dollar bill, a key Masonic symbol. Patterns in the way Washington streets are laid out. Connect the major traffic circles and you can clearly see a 5-pointed star, an important symbol for Freemasons.
Zooming into the area in front of the Capitol building, many researchers have identified Masonic compasses built into the street plan. The compasses that run along Pennsylvania and Maryland avenues point to the White House and the Jefferson Memorial. The spread of the compasses is 1 royal mile. The Jefferson Memorial, White House, and House of the Temple are centrally located on these nodes. The point of the Pentagon facing the White House is at this node. This is simply too much coincidence to have not been the product of intentional design. Here's the 1992 Israeli Supreme Court building in Jerusalem. Does this pyramid on top containing a window look familiar? The Eye of Providence, the same symbol found in the streets of D.C. and on the dollar bill. Many researchers have seen the Tree of Life from Jewish mysticism encoded in D.C.'s traffic circles and monuments. However, DCSymbols.com is the only place that shows how the streets and traffic circles match this early depiction of the Porte Lucis Tree of Life from 1516. Scott Circle exemplifies the secret architecture of D.C. It's plain to see once you have the knowledge, but remains hidden to the general public.
Near the Capitol, streets form a replica of the square and compass, probably the most familiar Masonic trademark. George Washington used Masonic rituals and wore a Masonic apron when he laid the cornerstone of the Capitol in 1793. A special silver trowel made for the occasion was also used in similar cornerstone ceremonies for more than a dozen other federal buildings, including the Washington Monument, the Smithsonian, and the National Cathedral. Other symbols, though, you probably walk by every day without ever noticing.
The zodiac is on the periphery.
Washington has over 50 zodiacs, circles containing the 12 astrological signs. You can find them in public buildings like the Federal Reserve, the Library of Congress, even the U.S. Capitol, like this one, on the memorial to President James Garfield on the south side of the Capitol. And this one, across from the National Gallery. It's dedicated to its benefactor, Andrew Mellon.
Mellon, of course, was a Mason, and it was designed by some brother Masons and placed here at the behest of brother Masons. So it's very much a Masonic thing.
Washington, D.C. is not just a city of politics and power. It is a city of the stars.
The lore of Freemasonry marks Washington in other hidden ways as well. Consider, for example, the number 33, cherished by the Masons.
33 is a very important number in ancient mysticism. There's a reason that Jesus Christ was said to be 33. There is a reason that there are 33 vertebrae in our spine, and that much of Freemasonry has to do with the concept of the body as a temple.
33 repeats throughout the Masonic house of the temple.
There are 33 columns or pillars.
Sure.
Each one 33 feet tall.
Yes.
And the same number is built into one of D.C.'s most famous sites.
The cap on the Washington Monument weighs exactly
3,300 pounds.
Yeah.
3,300 pounds.
That's right. The capstone matches that mystical number. The Freemasons influenced the founding of America in profound ways.
If you have a group of men who are Masons and simultaneously founding fathers, and part of their Masonic ideal is that all men are equal, of course that will be an underlying theme in the founding of a country. America wasn't founded a Christian country, it became a Christian country. The important thing to remember with the Masons and the founding fathers is that many of the founding fathers were deists.
Deists believe that a supreme being created the universe, but that being is impersonal. It won't answer your prayers or even hear them.
So when you talk about the founding fathers, who believed in deism as opposed to theism?
Almost all of them. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Adams.
There are a lot of people who say there is no proof, for example, that Thomas Jefferson was a Freemason.
That is true, but certainly a deist. Thomas Jefferson went so far as to take the Holy Bible and remove all of the references to anything miraculous, to the resurrection, to the virgin birth. Jefferson himself said that the idea of the virgin birth, Christ springing from a virgin, would one day seem as much like myth as the idea of Minerva springing from the head of Jupiter.
The founding fathers didn't just read the Bible. They also read Roman and Egyptian mythology. And they read the stars.
There is a painting in the Capitol.
Yes.
Tell me about it.
Well, it's a painting that I was shocked to find was there. I said there is a painting called The Apotheosis of Washington. Apotheosis meaning the God-making of Washington.
George Washington becoming a god.
It seemed almost irreverential. It was like, how can a man become a god?
Again, can you imagine anyone putting forth that notion of politicians as gods?
Right.
Here we are in the 21st century.
Well,
you'd be run out of town.
You'd be run out of town. There was a statue of George Washington that sat in the Capitol. He was unclothed. It was a model of a statue of Zeus. It was George Washington as a god.
Right.
And that did get run out of the Capitol building.
When they thought of becoming godlike, the founders were thinking about perfecting their minds through science and learning. Cliff Porter is senior warden of Enlightenment Lodge 198 in Colorado. Brothers here say they are seeking eternal truths, learning ancient mysteries. Reluctantly, they opened a few of their doors to our cameras. They practice alchemy here, the ancient art that sought to turn lead into gold. You might think of alchemy as pseudoscience, but it's also been used through the centuries as a metaphor of personal transformation. Initiates go through a ritual that's meant to be intense and startling. First, the subject's vision is taken away with a hoodwink placed over his head. Then, a master mason, dressed as the Grim Reaper, issues a warning.
If you persevere, you will be purified, you will overcome darkness, you will be enlightened. But if your soul is fearful, do not proceed.
If you're not comfortable with what's going on, if you're nervous, if you think maybe you've approached the craft for the wrong reasons, you're given a chance to say, I'm no longer okay with this.
Sean Byer joined the Freemasons recently and went through the initiation. Those who elect to continue are led into a place the Masons would not let us show you, a chamber of reflection.
You go into the chamber of reflection and you remove the hoodwink, and you're presented with what is a very interesting image.
The chamber includes a human skull and bones, elements used in alchemy, and a pen and paper, where the initiate can write a last will and testament.
Some of the symbols are meant to help you think about the fact that your life isn't going to go on forever. And frankly, it causes a very profound experience.
You described it as being located in the bowels of the Capitol.
Chambers of reflection can exist anywhere.
Right.
Many Masonic lodges have them. There are Masons who have them in their homes.
This kind of macabre symbolism has the Freemasons practice some kind of black magic. The last master Mason to serve as president was Gerald Ford. The Freemasons' secret rituals still connect them to a rich, powerful, mystical tradition.
As with any organization, there's some who understand the core and some who are on the periphery.
A double-headed phoenix, the pillars from the Temple of Solomon, a snake consuming itself. They come from a mysterious book called The Secret Teachings of All Ages. The Secret Teachings was written in the 1920s by a Canadian-American named Manly P. Hall, who founded the Philosophical Research Society in Los Angeles. It carries on his work, studying the wisdom of the ancients. Its director is Obadiah Harris.
The ancient mysteries are about the divination of man. How it is that you can become more fully human and achieve a level of consciousness beyond the reasoning mind.
The Freemasons have guarded the ancient mysteries for centuries. What other secrets does Washington hold? The Capitol Rotunda has a real-life secret. Stumps of iron in the floor that used to be part of a railing. In the 1820s, there was a hole in the floor, leading down to a lower level, the Capitol crypt.
You also found this labyrinth of rooms in the basement areas and sub-basement of the Capitol.
Right. The understories of the U.S. Capitol are filled with these tiny rooms. The blueprint of the Capitol building is an astonishing document. It looks like right out of a labyrinth of ancient Greece.
The Library of Congress has its own treasures, hidden in plain sight.
You've got this astonishing staircase here with an anachronistic sort of feature. You've got these little cherubs, these putti. You've got one up here that's holding a telephone.
Yeah, right there.
I mean, and you've got one down here, an entomologist. He's catching butterflies. You have this bizarre fusion of these little religious figures with scientific concepts.
And of course, we had to check out the main reading room.
It's been called the most beautiful room in the world. It's an octagon lit in 8 different directions, so there are no shadows. No shadows anywhere. The room really seems to radiate.
The National Cathedral, with stones from Mount Sinai in the altar steps, a moon rock set in a stained glass window, and a gargoyle in the form of Darth Vader.
At the CIA, there is a sculpture that I don't think a lot of people know.
There is an American sculptor, James Sanborn. He has created a sculpture that has an enormous series of letters on them that appear random but are actually a code that fascinates me and a lot of cryptologists, that has an enormous series of letters on them that appear random but are actually a code.
And who knows the meaning of that code?
Only WW.
That's it.
That's it.
WW is William Webster, the director of the CIA in 1990 when Kryptos was installed. Webster was given the key to the sculpture's secret messages, but he's never revealed it. And not one of the CIA's army of cryptologists has cracked the entire code.
America wasn't founded a Christian country. It became a Christian country.
No doubt, what you have viewed today will shock many to the core and shatter the reality of some. Regardless of your feelings on the matter, the facts are indisputable and you can't change the facts. The Great American Delusion, Part 2, Christianity, will be available soon, possibly today. Thank you for watching and have a blessed day.